Welcome to Chowder and Grits, the podcast for Virginia Tech and ACC sports. I'm Justin Cochiola alongside Tim Hirth. It is Wednesday, August 31st, and we are previewing the upcoming 2022 Virginia Tech Hokies football season. The Brent Pry era officially kicks off in 2 days on a Friday night, of course, against Old Dominion. We're going to look at the Hokies up and down, discuss things to kind of watch for, expectations, and just a lot of question marks because we have no idea what to expect because we've never seen this coaching staff. We've never seen Brent Pry as a head coach before, but it's going to be a lot of fun. But before all that, Tim, what's going on?
You know, just biding my time here until week one gets here. Week 0 was kind of nice to get some college football in wall to wall. Scott Frost's seat is anything but chilly at the moment. But that was the most predictable collapse I've ever seen. Nebraska just finds a way to get in its own way constantly.
So I've got a hot take here.
Yeah.
Did Nebraska really collapse? I don't know.
Yeah, they did. And it was because of that stupid onside kick. I don't know if you were watching the game.
So I wasn't watching the game, but all I heard about was this onside kick.
Terrible.
So I went back and I watched the extended highlight. So my thing on that onside kick is, do I ever like doing an onside kick after you've scored 2 touchdowns in a row and taken back complete control of the game? No. Is that the first time that's ever happened in the history of football? It happens a lot, actually.
Yeah.
And my thing with that onside kick, it's 28-17. It's early third quarter. Not even mid. There's 10 minutes left in the third quarter.
Yeah, it's half a game.
They did not lose the game because of that. They lost the game because they're pretty much inferior in every way, whether or not that's coaching or football-wise. I mean, look at Northwestern had a bad year last year, but top to bottom, they are far and away a better program than Nebraska has been in 20 years. They win at Northwestern. They don't win consistently, it's true. But they win.
It's true. I thought Helinski wasn't way better than anybody thought he would be. He was mostly a game manager, highly accurate, not really pushing the ball down the field. The thing that kind of took me off guard was Nebraska got manhandled on the offensive and defensive lines. I mean, they're supposed to have better athletes. They're supposed to be physically stronger, and they can't figure it out. I will say, Helinski was great.
Nebraska lost because they couldn't stop the run.
Pat Fitzgerald is a great coach. He outcoached the hell out of Scott Frost. Scott Frost seemed to make no adjustments at halftime in that game, which is kind of that's what he does. He doesn't make adjustments. But I really do think that the effect of that onside kick, you could feel the momentum completely evaporate. At the time they tried that onside kick, Nebraska you felt them rolling finally. You could see that athleticism shining. I think it was off the back of a 50-yard touchdown run that scored prior to that onside kick. And you could feel it. Watching it live, you could feel it. As soon as that happened, I knew Northwestern was going to get back into that game and they were going to stop the bleeding. And it was so unnecessary at that moment. But I think they just overthought it a little bit. Scott Frost got a lot of criticism for not having a special teams coach. And I think this was one of those times where they hired a special teams coach in the offseason. And maybe they just tried to kind of showcase what it's like to have a special teams coach and try a little tricky dicky special teams move, and it blew up in their face. But I will say, bad look from Scott Frost to throw Whipple under the bus after his first game as offensive coordinator. I thought that was a terrible quote, and people online are trying to dissect, was he lumping himself in with the lack of creativity in offense? And I don't buy that. To me, it just like a guy who's deflected. Scott Frost throws everybody under the bus. This is not new.
Right. He's Nebraska's in the same situation Virginia Tech was in last year with a coach where they know what's coming. The difference with them is I think Frost's buyout drops some point in October, so I think Mark Whipple will probably be the interim there for probably majority of the season, if we're being honest. But yeah, either way, I just thought it was interesting. I think it got magnified because it's Scott Frost in Nebraska. But really, if you stop and look at it, there's still 25 minutes left in the game, you're only up 11. It's not like they were up 21. And then they just got absolutely dominated the rest of the game. So there's no doubt Swift changed momentum and things like that. But, either way.
Momentum's a funny thing in college football, man.
I mean, it's Nebraska football, like corn and stuff. I mean, who cares, right? I mean, we're talking about real football right now.
I care. Every time I look at that, I remember the Danny Cole non-touchdown reception that we all thought was a touchdown live. Dyrell Roberts in the back of the end zone there a couple plays later. I have fond memories of Nebraska, at least where that game is concerned.
A home and away against them, and I want to say 08 and 09, or maybe it was 07 and 08, and Virginia Tech went 2-0, not to brag. But we're, like I said, 2 days away from kickoff. It's, I was thinking about it. It's our first Hokies football preview outside of the Fuente era. So that I'm excited about.
Oh, nice.
That's the last time we talk about Fuente, because we're not here to talk about the past, Tim. We're here to talk about today, in the future of Virginia Tech football.
I'm going to hold you to that.
So, I mean, I've got a lot of questions. I'm not going to lie. And we're going to preview Old Dominion right after this. It's going to be another episode coming to you back to back. We've been struggling to get our schedules to align as two middle-aged men with careers and young families may run into from time to time, but we'll get it more consistent as the season starts here. So appreciate you listening. If you don't mind, leave us a review, share the wealth, and pass along the podcast to anybody that may or may not enjoy Virginia Tech football. Even if they don't enjoy it, they may after they listen to us, right? So let's get started. I kind of want to start with the captains, right? Because there was kind of some noise around why are there so many captains? And to me, it's pretty simple. You've got Brent Pry coming in, and he's trying to reposition the culture. He's trying to change the narrative around Virginia Tech football. And the only non-captain, or the only captain who is a newbie to Virginia Tech, is Grant Wells. And I mean, I think you pretty much have to make your quarterback the captain, especially one that you named the starter with a couple weeks left to go in camp. And a guy who's not a true freshman, right? He's got 2 years of experience at the Power 5 level, or the Group of 5 level. Power 5, Group of 5.
Yeah, Group of 5.
Group of 5.
Yeah.
And so, I think the quote that stood out to me was Pry mentioned that, I want them involved in high-level conversations. I want them talking to me about the culture, talking about uniforms, how we travel, procedures around what is and is not positive. And I'm paraphrasing here, but, I think that is something that was severely lacking, and probably the reason why he's got so many different guys to point to. I mean, if you look at the defensive side, you've got Shamari Connor, you've got Norrell Pollard, you've got Peter Moore on the special teams unit, you've got Silas Zanzi, who's been there for a long time, Caleb Smith, former walk-on, now getting a shot as kind of the number one receiver, and then you got Dax, obviously, on the defensive side as well, and then Wells. So you've got really a myriad of guys who have been there a long time for the most part. And then, he was sure to kind of cover the entire team. So to me, I think that's why there were so many captains this year. I don't know if that's common at Penn State. I didn't look into it, but I would imagine if it's not, it's something that may change going forward. But I just saw a lot of noise around, geez, why are there so many captains this year?
Yeah, it's not uncommon at other football programs to see 5, 6, 7 captains. I think you hit the nail on the head. It may be the way Penn State does it, and that might have been some research we could have done before the podcast, but didn't really think about it. When you're trying to set a culture, you've got, you're going to have guys that don't buy in up front. You're going to have guys that dive in wholeheartedly, and those leaders that do buy in, I think it's a nice bit of recognition to go ahead and name them captain. If they're in line with your vision, your leadership, go ahead and set the tone for the program. Get those guys those C's on their chest, even though they probably won't have C's on their chest. You know what I mean? I think it's a good look. And it's certainly not uncommon when you look at other football programs. There's no cap on captains in college football.
Yeah, there's no doubt. So now that we got that out of the way, let's start with the preview. And I'm going to start with the defense. I feel like we always start with the offense and everybody always starts with the offense, but looking at Virginia Tech this year, they're going to win with the defense. And this is going to be a defensive-led football team. Brent Pry is a defensive guy. I think they have the most talent on the defensive side of the ball. I think they have the best two deep on the defensive side of the ball.
Yep.
And their defense is what is going to allow them to stay in games. So just a recap of Brent Pry's resume here, and it's pretty lengthy. So he's an extremely accomplished defensive coordinator. If you look back to his first year as DC in 2016, Penn State goes 11-3. They finished 7th in the nation overall. They averaged 8.1 tackles for loss per game. Jump to 17, also go 11-2. Earns the Broyles Award nomination. Finished 7th in FBS in scoring defense at 16.5 points per game. Sacks per game at just over 3. Jump to 18. Defense leads the nation in sacks per game at 3.6. Ranked 4th in tackles for loss in the country. They also ranked 5th in the country in yards per pass attempt, 8th in defensive pass efficiency, and 11th in red zone scoring percentage. 19. Again, Penn State goes 11-2. And I had forgotten Penn State had so many 11-win seasons until I went back and looked at this. Yeah. They ranked 8th nationally in scoring defense, 16 points per game. Led the nation in fewest yards per carry and forced fumble. Ranked 5th in rushing defense for the entire year. 2020, again, kind of a weird year, 2020. 3rd in the Big Ten in total defense, 17th nationally. 2nd in pass defense, 2nd in tackles for loss, 4th in rush defense. 2021, his last year as defensive coordinator at Penn State. Again, a Broyles Award nominee. If you're not familiar with the Broyles Award, top assistant in the nation, assistant coach in the nation. Ranked 4th nationally in red zone defense, 7th in scoring defense, 8th in defensive pass efficiency, and held their opponents to 4.7 yards per play. So if you look at it, since 2016, Penn State posted 3 seasons with 11 wins and 4 seasons with 9 or more victories, and has a Big Ten championship, all while Brent Pry was the defensive coordinator at what is known as linebacker U, much thanks to Brent Pry and the type of player that he would bring to campus there. So also finished in the FBS top 25 in total defense 8 times over his entire career as a defensive coach. So very decorated. And I think, that should bring some excitement to, the Virginia Tech fan base, because it's really kind of getting back to the roots of what Virginia Tech does. Does that mean it's going to happen this year and Virginia Tech's going to finish in the top 10 and top 20 and the top 25 and the top 30 in some of these categories? I mean, probably not. I mean, I guess it could happen, but if you're expecting that to happen, you're just setting yourself up for a letdown, because it's unrealistic to expect at this point. One thing I think is good from the philosophy that Pry's going to run is he runs a multiple 4-3 scheme. It's going to look very similar to what a Bud Foster run defense looks like. Foster would run a 4-2-5 pretty much, and he would leverage that whip linebacker as kind of this hybrid, like strong side linebacker role / safety. Brent Pry's a little bit more, locked and loaded on the 4-3. Leverages a Sam and a Will linebacker, strong side, weak side. A lot of 8-man fronts, very focused on gap assignments and control. Everybody has one specific thing that they're narrowed in and focused on. And, if you look at the secondary at Penn State, they pretty much played zone 3 out of 4 times.
Right.
If you compare that to last season where Virginia Tech was at defensively, they were playing man. It was probably about a 40-60 split. So I think we're going to see a lot more zone defense this year than we have in the past. Pry was a guy, he likes to blitz. He blitzed 38% of the time on average from 2016 to 2021, had 50-plus sacks 3 times in that time frame. And, I think one of the benefits that he has coming into this is kind of what Justin Hamilton put into motion with trying to recruit lengthier guys and bigger guys on the defensive line. So that's one of the stark contrasts between a Bud Foster and a Brent Pry defense. Bud Foster would often go after undersized defensive linemen, and that worked for the most part. Present day, Pry likes a lengthier guy. Hamilton liked a lengthier guy. So you've got some of those guys on the roster now, which I think is good. So we'll see how that kind of progresses throughout the year. But that's kind of my introduction into the Brent Pry defense and some of the expectations around the coach and the scheme and kind of what to expect. Anything you want to add there?
No, I think you're spot on. I mean, to me, it's that cultural alignment of what he does, what he specializes in, what he wants to bring. That gets us back to the whole identity thing we harped on last year, where it seemed like we were just trying to figure out what our identity was for 4 or 5 years. There's no question about identity when it comes to what Pry wants to do. It's going to be defense first, blue collar, just like we had under Foster and Beamer. I'm happy to see that alignment. You hit on a good point, which is obviously we may not see drastic results the first year. That's to be expected when you consider where Brent Pry is in the process of rebuilding. But the defense, that's not to say that the cupboards are bare on defense. I think that could be a pretty decent defense there. You mentioned the whip linebacker, and in the Sam linebacker and Pry system is going to be really similar. He's got a pretty, I think he moved Keontae Jenkins from safety to that Sam linebacker position. You got another safety in J.R. Walker that's there behind him. So that will schematically operate pretty similarly, and you're going to have the same kind of prototypical athlete in that position. Get a guy playmaking closer to the box. So, I think you're spot on everything you said, and I certainly can't wait for it. It's one of those things where the bedrock of Virginia Tech football has felt like it's been missing for years. And establishing an identity, getting a defense that you can be proud of and plays hard-nosed football is going to go a long way. Even if the results aren't there in that first year, you're going to be able to see the beginnings of what Brent Pry wants in his vision here in the first few games. So I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think, just everything from the culture and aspect, the lunch pail's coming back.
Yes, sir.
It looks a little bit different. I think the VT looks a little bit different on it this time around. But yeah, I'm excited about that. Looks like the Southwest Virginia shop might be releasing some lunch pail inspired clothing. So I'll be jumping on that wagon when that's coming around.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to look forward to. I think, you mentioned Keontae Jenkins. He's a guy who everybody likes to point to. Well, you start moving guys around because you have to, not because you want to. It sounds like they really thought he was a much better fit at that linebacker position than he was at safety. It may not be the case for everybody to switch positions, but they seem to really like him there, and the fact that he's rolling in as the starter, I think it should make you feel pretty solid. And he's had hype all camp. But
right.
let's start up front. And I think, a lot of what we're going to see this year, a lot of what I'm looking forward to seeing is, same guy, different dude, right?
Yep.
I think that's kind of what you're expecting when you've got a new coaching staff coming in. You've got a lot of hype around the coaching staff. I think a lot of people get excited and we're like, well, this guy was crap. This guy was crap. This guy was crap. But at the end of the day, it's just like coaches are going to coach. Players got to go out and play. And I don't think it's going to be just a drastic, just unbelievable transformation of some of these guys that we've seen for a number of years. But you do hope to see growth in areas where maybe it's been stagnant at times with the past regime. But if you look at defensive line, I think that's probably one of our strongest groups on the team. You've got Garbett and Jalen Griffin starting at end. You've got some depth there with CJ McCray and Cole Nelson. Cole Nelson, he's a guy who played 11 games last year, pretty sparingly, but has gotten a lot of hype from the coaching staff. So they seem to be pretty high on Mr. Nelson. So we'll see kind of what role he is involved in. There doesn't seem to be much depth behind those four. So it's just kind of, as the season progresses, we'll see who can kind of jump up and snatch some playing time, essentially.
Yeah.
Anything you want to highlight on those guys?
Just the depth. I mean, we're going to be talking about that a lot throughout this roster, and that's one of those things you expect in a transition period, especially when we've essentially got a lost class. I can't remember, it was 2 or 3 years ago. I think we've got 5 guys remaining from one of our recruiting classes, maybe less than that now. But we're reaping the benefits or the repercussions from that right now. And yeah, you're a couple injuries away from real issues there on the defensive line, specifically at end. They've got some guys they're excited about, some guys we were excited about when they signed on as fresh, and Keyshawn Burgos being one of them with a 6'5" frame. But defensive line is a hard place to really come in and make an impact as a true freshman. So you're hopefully not counting on those guys when it really matters.
Yeah, and then if we move to the interior, it looks like Mario Kendricks and Narelle Pollard are going to hold down the 1-2, with Fuga being a guy who's going to rotate in as essentially a 1. So you've got like a pretty solid 3 deep there at defensive tackle. I think names we'll see will be Wilfred Panay. We'll see how he kind of develops. He was I believe he was from France, came in as a tight end, transitioned to a defensive tackle last year. He's still there this year, so there's been some pretty positive reports around his development. Guys you may be looking for, like a Gunnar Givens, doesn't sound like he's probably going to get a look this year. What you hope to see is when you're playing teams like Wofford or, other teams that we should beat soundly, that's when you want to see these guys get in and, play up to 4 games, maintain their red shirt, and get that kind of experience, which is something Virginia Tech has struggled with in past years, really kind of getting those young guys in with like legit playing time and game experience. So
yeah,
defensive tackle I'm pretty high on.
Me too. Obviously what you're getting in Pollard and Kendricks. They can be wrecking balls in the middle, but a guy I really like too is Fuga. I think Fuga has been a real solid player for us over the years. And this is a great time for him to come in. I think on the depth chart he's listed as so there's basically 3 starters. But Fuga's a guy I've got my eye on. I'm really looking forward to see him. And Wolf Panay, you mentioned it, started off at tight end, one of those guys who hadn't had a lot of football, but was kind of raw, athletic, somebody they thought they could mold into a player, move from tight end to defensive tackle. So out of curiosity, I'd love to see where he's at. He's, I think, listed at 6'1", 290 on the roster. That's good enough size, especially on a 4-down defensive tackle.
6'3", 290.
6'3", 290. Okay, well, there you go. Yeah. That's even better. You like that height, and certainly you want to get as close to that 300 as you can, but size, at least weight speaking, not as important in a 4-down as opposed to a 3-down. So, I'm looking forward to it and seeing how he develops. That'll be pretty cool to see because he's a guy we've been waiting on.
Yeah, if we move over to linebacker, so we've highlighted Keonta Jenkins. You've got the double safety move over to the strong side linebacker position with J.R. Walker backing him up. Dax is in the middle at Mike. I don't think there's any surprise there. He's really kind of the leader of the D. I think the big surprise is at the Will linebacker spot, which is Jaden Keller. And
yeah,
I would say the guy he beat out is Alan Tisdale most prominently, but if you look at the depth chart that was released today, they've also got Jaden McDonald on there, listed ahead of Tisdale. Now there's only 1-1 and there's no 2 or 3, so I think what that's implying is that all of these guys are going to get a look, but I would imagine that's the pecking order right now.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I would say the big surprise is Keller. I mean, he's a redshirt freshman. He only appeared in 4 games last season, but they've been super high on him the entire camp. Jaden McDonald, I believe he's the kid. He's one of the McDonald brothers from Salem, if I'm remembering correctly. Good size, 6'4", 231. I'm excited to see the McDonald duo team up in Blacksburg, but I think that's one of the things that I'm kind of looking forward to this year is some of these young guys. Like, I think there's been this perception around just the entire team that, this is a bare cabinet. And I just don't think that's correct. Now, is there a lot of depth everywhere? No, but I think there's a lot of unknowns when you get to that depth. So there may be more depth than we think as the season wears on. But I think if you have to get into that depth early on in the season, that's where you're going to be most concerned, right? Because you don't want to necessarily see these guys who have been through one or two camps and they're just not ready physically or mentally or whatever it is, get on the field in a big situation and cost the team a game. But it seems like this coaching staff is high enough on a lot of these younger guys to put them in positions to start and play right away. Because if you've got two redshirt freshmen who are ready to go at the will spot, I mean, that should give us some excitement around what to expect for the next 4 years from that linebacker group.
Yeah, and you're seeing some rangy guys out there. I think there was an emphasis on getting more speed in that linebacker unit and getting more speed on the field. I think especially last year, that was a place where we were let down on quite a few occasions. The lateral quickness of our linebackers just wasn't quite good enough going sideline to sideline, and I think that's a place we've seemingly wanted to enforce. I like to see those 6'3", 6'4" guys in there. Weights are a little down from what you would expect from Power 5 linebackers in 220s, 230s. But again, all that's about getting speed, onto the field. And I'm really looking forward to just see how these linebackers are leveraged. When you talk about a Brent Pry defense, a lot of that comes with it is blitzing. And it'll be interesting to see the blitz packages we work up out of this group. And, it's nice to have an anchor like Dax Hollifield in the center. That's just really good to have somebody like that with a new coaching staff who's been around as long as he has that can help, craft this culture in the right way. And he's right there in the middle leading the defense. So, I don't know what to expect out of this linebacker group. I think we've got one known and that's about it. So that's an interesting place to be. But I think there is potential this ends up being a pretty good unit. Obviously, just like it was with the defensive line, depth is an issue. You mentioned that. But we say depth is an issue, and I think you said, what we really have are questions here. It's hard. You don't want to compare staff to staff, but just a change in scheme, a change in voice, a change in coaching can really, really improve a team and individuals. And it'll be interesting to see what kind of steps some of these guys that were on the roster last year have taken in the offseason.
A unit that I'm excited about is the secondary just as a whole. I think Virginia Tech will be very strong in the secondary and hopefully be anchored by a strong defensive line as well. So I think those are the two groups on the defense where you really look at and you say these are two of the strongest groups on the team. Dorian Strong, hard to believe he's a junior already.
Wow.
But he is the clear number one at corner. Then you've got Armani Chapman. Breon Murray is kind of the 1A, 1B option on the other side. DJ Harvey sounds like he's going to be the guy who they call on in nickel situations, and also the two behind Strong. So it'll be exciting to see him get some play this year. And then if you look at safety, we've got Shamari Connor, who his play kind of stands on its own over the last 4 or 5 years, however long he's been in Blacksburg now. And Nasir Peoples at safety. So some young guys behind them like Jalen Stroman and Nikwe Hawkins is more of a older guy with more experience as far as like years go, but inexperience from a playing standpoint. So we'll see what happens there. Hopefully those guys can stay healthy and then work in some reps where needed.
Yeah, no, I think that's a unit that could change the outcome of the season. Talking about, maybe some turnovers on defense leading to points. There's a lot of guys that make plays in the backfield. Looking at you, Shamari Connor. We've got some good cover guys there. I think of all the units on the field, this is the one I'm most confident in. I think that would probably be the case for most folks that are looking at this roster. But like you said, the hallmark of prior Virginia Tech defenses was always the ability to create turnovers, create havoc, get points on the board. We didn't see a whole lot of that in the past few years, but I think we could be looking at a group here that could take us right back into that pretty quickly. So I'm excited to see what they do, and certainly the most confidence out of the other groups. Again, though, depth still kind of a question there. Really the whole theme with the entire team, so it's going to sound super repetitive. But staying healthy going to be key. So Dwight Galton, that strength and conditioning staff, we're going to hope have got these guys prepared and flexible for the season to come, because we're going to need a lack of injuries here.
Yeah, so I mean, I think overall, like you said, I think this is the group on the team that's going to take Virginia Tech to where they can go, and then hope the offense can step up and help them win some games. But it's going to be up to the defense to put Virginia Tech in a position to win, in my opinion, and then the offense is going to have to supplement that. So, I think the big thing, if you look across the ACC, is quarterback play. I mean, everybody likes to jump on the ACC as not being great at football, and honestly, it's a pretty subpar product. It has been for a long time. But if you look across the conference, there's a lot of really good quarterbacks, and Virginia Tech's going to play a lot of those guys this year. Tyler Van Dyke at Miami, Devin Leary at NC State. Those are the two that come off the head. Brennan Armstrong at UVA. Those are good quarterbacks. And so if you can neutralize them and, keep them contained, you look at a Keaton Slovis, who to me is about as subpar quarterback as you can be with no running game at Pitt, which they haven't had since 2018. Not sure why they're getting so much hype. That's for a different conversation. Virginia Tech should be able to go into these games and compete. And there's nobody on this schedule, and we'll talk about schedule in a bit, that you look at and say, like, yeah, there's zero chance Virginia Tech can win that game. You can say that on the flip side too. Like, yeah, Virginia Tech could probably lose a majority of these games, and they could. And that's just kind of where they're at as a program right now. But we'll see how they kind of develop and mold over the year. But let's jump to the offense, and then we'll talk about the schedule, because I'm really jacked to talk about the schedule, if you can't tell. But I mean, offensively, like, it begins and ends with Grant Wells. I mean, he's going to be the guy that's ticking the clock this year. And, it may be unfair, but that's just the way it is. Welcome to the quarterback position, I guess. And Wells is a guy who, he threw for 3,500 yards last season. That would have put him second all-time on Virginia Tech's list as far as single season goes. He attempted 445 passes. The most ever thrown by a Virginia Tech quarterback was 441 by Michael Brewer, our boy. And then last season, comparatively, Virginia Tech threw 110 less passes, which was third fewest in the ACC. Now, there's good and bad with Wells. One, he's a volume passer. At least he was at Marshall. He also had a 2.9% interception rate last season, which ranked 110th in the FBS out of 160 quarterbacks. Second to last on that list, Jason Brown. So that's an interesting spot to be in from the quarterback position wise, at least the guys with experience. And then, you look at Wells overall, it's just hard to compare what they were doing at Marshall, Group of Five conference, much different situation, different talent around them. My biggest thing with Grant Wells this year is I don't know how we're going to use him, because you got Tyler Bowen, who is back in the college game. He took a year off to go to Jacksonville in the NFL as the tight ends coach. He really only spent 1 year as like the lead offensive coordinator at Penn State after Ronnie, who's at Old Dominion, left. Yep. So he kind of filled in for him. So the thing with Bowen you look at is he's going to focus in on the tight end, you'd imagine. He's going to want to run the ball.
Yep.
And I just don't know how much Virginia Tech is set up for that this year. I'm not sure what Virginia Tech is set up for this year offensively. And so I think that's what we have to find out, because they've got some running back names that we're familiar with. There's an injured Malachi Thomas who's not going to be ready to go for the start of the season. He's week to week with some kind of foot injury. Right. Then you've got Jalen Holston, Keshawn King. So there's some names that we know and we're familiar with, but they're guys who have been around for a number of years, and we kind of know who they are at this point. Right. It would be unrealistic to put the entire offensive philosophy on those guys. So we'll basically have to see what we get. I mean, if you look at Wells, he was only pressured on 19.5% of his dropbacks last year, which was fourth nationally, fourth best by the Marshall offensive line. When pressured, he threw for less than 50% completion percentage, 476 yards, 1 touchdown, and 4 picks, which is good for 84th nationally in pass efficiency. Pro Football Focus ranked him as the 43rd quarterback overall in the nation in pass efficiency. So that's just to kind of give you an idea of kind of quarterback Grant Wells is. We'll see how it develops. He's got a new coaching staff. He's got Brad Glenn. So, Brad Glenn he's a guy who we highlighted earlier in the offseason. He's really excited about Grant Wells. So that's kind of the overview there. But there's really just a bunch of unknowns. And we just don't know. We don't know how we're going to use the guy.
Yeah, that's what makes this season so exciting is there's unknowns all over the place. Grant Wells probably the most exciting of all of them, to me at least, when you talk about his profile versus what we have seen. I think parts of our frustration last year, the year before, was the overall conservative nature of our passing game in general, where it felt like we just weren't pushing the envelope enough. We weren't going vertical enough. We weren't trying to make the deep throws to maybe get some chunk plays. I think you're going to see that, whether or not it's built off the play action mainly. How they're going to scheme it up is a little harder to say. Obviously, there's not a lot of tape on Bowen and what he wants to do. I think what will be key will be balance. I know based on what Pry has said to this point, he said he's, something along the lines of, he's been watching offenses and he's been a defensive coordinator for so long that he knows what offenses are hard for defensive coordinators to prepare for. Reading in between the lines, I think when a defensive coordinator says that, they mean an offense that can throw efficiently and run well. Those are always the hardest to game plan for if you can do both well. So what I expect is a 50-50 split between passing and running. I don't think we're going to see a passing offense that was as pass heavy as Marshall. Marshall's borderline air raid offense with those throwing numbers. But Grant Wells is not a game manager, which excites me. Grant Wells is a guy that isn't afraid to put it in tight windows, isn't afraid to sling it. And that's something that we just didn't have last year, right? We had a dynamic playmaker on the ground who was extremely conservative with his arm, more like a game manager with wheels than anything else. With Wells, we're not going to see that. He wasn't allowed
to make his own decisions in the run game.
Correct. Which we said we weren't going to mention the last staff, so yeah, we won't get into that.
Pointing out a difference between this year and last year.
But I am extremely excited to see what Grant is able to do. I think we were lucky to get him. I think the ceiling is rather high with him, and I think he's got the right kind of, profile for a quarterback that you want to see with an offense looking to make a stamp, looking to make an impression. He's not the guy that's going to go out there, play conservative football, not throw any interceptions for multiple weeks, and not take risks. It's going to be quite the opposite. What I am interested to see, though, is how we scheme around him, because I would be willing to bet it's going to be a little bit different than what they were working with at Marshall in regards to scheme. So, I'm jacked. Now, behind him, we do have a bit of a game manager, and that's not a knock at all. I think we are lucky to have 2 transfer quarterbacks that both have played in big games. Brown winning some rather large ones at South Carolina was helpful, but 2 very different type of quarterbacks. If something were to happen to Grant, I think we can feel pretty good that we're going to have a quarterback behind him who will be a bit more of a game manager and keep us in ball games. So I'm pretty happy where the quarterback room is right now.
Yeah, and honestly, it's interesting. If you look at the depth chart that was released today, you don't even see Taj Bullock's name listed.
Yeah, I noticed that.
And so he was basically the only guy we had, that's in the quarterback room coming into this season. So it could be much worse for Virginia Tech. I do think Grant Wells was a big get for this staff, and hopefully he's more of a more than just a bridge quarterback and more than just a game manager. He's somebody who can go out there. He can definitely take the top off of defense.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's where he was most dangerous, was on the deep ball last year, especially passes over 20 yards. And, yeah, he's going to throw some picks. So that you're going to have to live with the good and the bad. He's kind of a gunslinger mentality, and it is what it is. But, I think that'll be good for this offense. I think we'll see a lot more fireworks and a lot more chances being taken. We just may see more turnovers when it comes to that, which you got to take the good with the bad sometimes. Running back, we kind of hit on a little bit. I mean, again, if you look at the depth chart that was released, Jalen Holston, Keyshawn King, Chance Black, 1, 2, 3. There has been some talk around Keyshawn King. The coaching staff seems to like him quite a bit, but doesn't feel like they're ready to put the ring on it, if you know what I mean. So still some development things there. I think King has been hinted at being used as a kick returner. And I didn't have notes to talk about that much, but it sounds like DJ Harvey may be our punt return option. At wide receiver, it's an interesting group because we've got Caleb Smith, who's kind of like the one, right? I don't know how I feel about that, to be honest. I think Caleb Smith is a solid football player. I don't think he's going to put the fear into any defensive coordinators. The guy that I really, really want to see emerge out of this group is Dwayne Lofton. And I think he can. I think he could be the guy who really takes the top off the defense. And then you mix in a guy like Jaden Blue, who's probably going to be utilized in the slot a little bit more. But kind of the surprise was Stephen Gosnell as the number 3 receiver overall, who's the transfer from Carolina. So he's a guy who's had some hype in the past, hasn't been able to really put it together. But, we'll see what can happen. So they've got an interesting room. I'm not ready to say it's a weak group of receivers at all. I'd feel a lot better if Tayvion Robinson was still there.
Yeah, for sure.
But he's obviously at Kentucky now, so good luck to him. But you got Jaden Blue, who had a really good, I believe it was a 2019 for Temple. Yep. So you've got some guys who have really flashed in the past. Dwayne Lofton didn't really have much of an opportunity last year. Did burn his red shirt, unfortunately. So you really hope to see him get a big opportunity to shine in this offense. And then tight end. We'll just throw tight ends in with this.
Sure.
I think Nick Gallo and Drake Dulius, I think those are some pretty solid veteran tight ends that may be a pretty big centerpiece of this offense. And then you throw in kind of a wild card like Connor Blumrick, who's not going to be your lineup at the tight end spot every single play. He's probably going to be used as kind of like an H-back, like Dalton Keene was in the backfield, maybe in the wild turkey formation, maybe split out wide at the tight end spot. So we'll see how they use Blumrick. They seem to like him, but he's really more of kind of a gadget guy, I would think, for this offense.
Yeah, I feel good about the tight end room. I think there's more known quantities there outside of obviously not knowing what Connor's going to be able to give you lining up across multiple positions. I wouldn't be surprised to see him split out wide at points, especially in the red zone. I think what we've got here is a group that could be decent to good, but not one with a lot of proven results. So it'll be interesting to see. One of the biggest shortcomings, I think, last year, especially with the quarterback situation, was we didn't get to see a lot of really guys emerge in that wide receiver room. Really, the production was top heavy. What little production there was, it wasn't one of the guys, our quarterback wasn't going to get 6-7 wide receivers involved like some teams are able to do. So now we've got a room that's unproven. I do like some of the players we've gotten there. I think Blue has potential to be a really good receiver, especially working out of that slot. Dwayne Lofton, another guy you mentioned. One of the things that we need to do is be able to stretch the field. Not sure we've got that. If we are able to stretch the field, I do feel pretty confident that a good bit of that's going to come from Lofton. I think Caleb Smith can give you that. I think he's faster than maybe we think he is, based on what we've seen to this point. And Caleb, a guy with a lot to prove. And you talk about a fifth-year senior like Caleb, that's going to be the leader of this unit. And I'm really hoping for a big year from him. But all the wide receivers in general, that's what's going to make watching this year so exciting for me. We've got the quarterback. We don't know what we're going to get. We don't really know what we're going to get out of the wide receivers. Running backs may be a little bit more of a known quantity with the tight ends. And overall, you're going to be looking at a scheme that we can't really nail down at this point. We just haven't seen enough from Bowen or heard from him enough to know exactly what he's looking to do. So for me, that means excitement. Other people may see that and see reasons to be nervous. I'm not there with this team this season, but I think this group together, all of these question marks that we've talked about, I'm pretty pumped to see where we're going to end up. But this is probably one of the position groups that I'm most concerned about on this roster. So being able to get some questions answered early on in the season about the productivity of the wideout spot going to be huge.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd put concern at the wide receiver room, just kind of unknown is really the way that I'm approaching it. Because like there's guys there that have produced, and there's guys there that were pretty, hyped up in the past as far as a recruitment standpoint. So I think it could be a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, I hope
the
so.
The group that I think is the biggest question mark on the team is his offensive line.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting mix of guys, and I'm actually kind of excited about the group for a couple reasons. One, there's just a lot of young guys in the two deep, and typically that wouldn't excite me. But I think with where this program is at and the fact that we've got Joe Rudolph as the offensive line coach, it's allowing him to mold these guys into the offensive linemen that he wants to see, right? So Silas Zanzi's your left tackle. No surprise there. Behind him is Xavier Chaplin, a true freshman, 6'6", 338 pounds.
Yeah, great size. Not where you on the depth chart where you want to see a true freshman.
Not where you want the true freshman at the left tackle spot. Left guard, you've got Jesse Hansen, redshirt junior, so you got some good experience there. I don't think he's ever been a full-time starter necessarily. And then the guy behind him who's gotten the most hype out of probably any freshman on the team is Braylon Moore. Again, a true freshman, 6'3", 290, so he's got pretty decent size. And I think, it wouldn't be a surprise to me if we see him starting at some position on the offensive line, not necessarily left guard, but somewhere by the end of the season. Center, you've got Johnny Jordan. Again, another senior with 6 years. I think this is his COVID year. His second year after he transferred from Maryland, so that's some good experience at center. And then behind him, you've got Jack Hollyfield, who obviously brother of Dax, redshirt freshman, 6'3", 300. He's picked up some size, which is good. He came in as a tight end when he was recruited. And then right guard, Caden Moore, a sophomore, a true sophomore, 6'3", 313, good size there. And then Daniel Militek, I guess is how you say that. Yeah. Redshirt freshman behind him. And then right tackle Parker Clements, I believe from Clover Hill High School, if I'm calling it out right. Redshirt sophomore, 6'7", 305. So you're kind of like Luke Tenuta size tackle. And then Bob Schick behind him, redshirt sophomore. So a ton of underclassmen. And you've got basically 3 new starters on that offensive line. I mean, you've only got 4 returning starters from the offense last season. So that's kind of where Virginia Tech is at from an offensive standpoint. So it's not just a new coaching staff. It's not just a new offensive identity. It's a new group of players that are now playing for the Hokies. So we can kind of guess at what's going to happen all we want, but literally nobody has any idea other than the coaching staff at this standpoint about what kind of unit we're going to have offensively.
No, it's one of those where we've harped on depth. I told you we were going to keep doing it. This is where the depth gets really scary. True freshman on the offensive line, not something you want to see in most cases. I think probably of all positions on the field, tackles are right up there with probably the hardest for freshmen to come in and have an impact. And when they do, they're usually forced there by injury. I will say, all things considered about this offensive line, having Joe Rudolph lends itself to a little bit more of a calming presence than I would otherwise be based on what I see on the depth chart. With Joe Rudolph that you are going to maximize the abilities of everybody on that line. The technique is going to be right. They're going to be coached to one of the highest standards in Power 5 football. So with everything that we've said about this group in particular, Joe Rudolph is there, and that can only bode well. And hopefully, he's able to take some of those young guys, like you said, mold them the way he wants them. And he certainly, at least on paper, got his work cut out for him in his first year.
No doubt. So let's jump over to the schedule and just get a really meaningless prediction as far as number of games we expect the Hokies to win. So if you look at their schedule, I kind of look at the Hokies, schedule this year in a couple of different stages. The first thing, and I think is maybe most important from a recruiting standpoint, is the Virginia games. You've got a road matchup against ODU. You're on the road at Liberty in late November, November 19th. You host Virginia Thanksgiving weekend. And there's somebody else Virginia-wise. No. So those are your 3 Virginia games. I think it's very important for Virginia Tech to come in and set the tone that they are the program in the state, in the Commonwealth, that is to be taken seriously. And, ODU will highlight in the next episode, right after this, should be available, is an interesting matchup just because there's so much familiarity between the two. You look at Liberty, they've got, Charlie Brewer there as the quarterback, so a guy who's had some success in his college career. And they've got some talent there, but for the most star, that is a 2 to 3 star U at this point. And then you got UVA, who's got Tony Elliott there in his first year as head coach, trying to install some things. They have Brennan Armstrong back. That game's so far away, it's just impossible to even talk about at this point. But I think that's important to set the stage. The other element of their schedule that's really interesting is they have 5 games in a row from basically October 1st through October 27th. We'll call it starting with the West Virginia game. It's a pretty difficult stretch.
Yeah.
You've got West Virginia at home, then you've got North Carolina, Pitt on the road back-to-back weeks. Then you host Miami, and then you go on the road to what I think is the best team in the ACC this year, NC State. So you've got 5 teams or 5 games in a row right there. I mean, that's going to be a very trying and taxing stretch on this team because those are some pretty good football teams. I mean, it's a little too early to worry about rankings, but 3 of those teams have numbers next to their names, and I think one is probably going to get exposed on Thursday night, which is Pitt. But, we'll see how it shakes out. And then, you've got the opener with Boston College, Brent Pry's first game as head coach, and then obviously that Thursday night game against West Virginia is going to be Lane's going to be rocking for that one.
Yeah, so I can't wait.
You really hope Pry can come in and win those like really meaningful games, but then also manage those super tough stretches for a football team that's trying to find its way under a new regime.
Yeah, I agree. That stretch you mentioned is extremely tough. There's some winnable games. I hope I don't ever see a schedule again with ODU and Liberty on it. Not a knock to either of those 2 both programs. Away. Yeah, both away, especially. I hope we're not seeing that again. But as far as the schedule goes, and I don't know if you want to get into predictions now or you wanted to wait.
Do it.
To me, this is a 500 football team. I think that's assuming that there are no injury issues. I would like to hedge my bet a little bit and say, if we do end up with some injury crisis, I think you're looking at a 4 or 5 win team. And that's to say if the injuries are outrageous. Sometimes you can have seasons like that in this game and really throw you off. I just don't think we're equipped from a depth standpoint to handle a lot of injuries. But as it stands, assuming we have a pretty average season in regards to injuries, I think 6 wins in a bowl game is about where this team ends up.
Yeah, so I'll say 6-6 as well, but I'll preface it with I think that'll be overachieving for Brent Pry in season 1. I think
I totally agree.
To me, that would be such a win from a Hokie standpoint, and it's possible they win more. It's definitely possible they win less. Yeah. I think if you realistically at this point look at it, which is difficult to do because there are so many unknowns, if we've mentioned multiple times. It's just hard to know what to expect from this team and, what Brent Pry is going to be like on the sideline and what his end game decision making is going to be like. And is Tyler Bowen ready to be the offensive coordinator? And, is that offensive line just too young and too inexperienced to really hold up over the course of a season? So we'll find out. I mean, I think they've got at least 2 conference wins against Duke and Georgia Tech. But Correct. You never know. It's the ACC Coastal. This is the last year of Coastal chaos, and then the divisions go away. So I think, honestly, if you look at the ACC Coastal, there's one team that I think stands out above the rest, and it pains me to say it, but it's probably Miami right now. I think 100%. They have the most talent of any team. North Carolina probably has the second most talent, but they're horribly coached. So I think
that defense looked bad last week too.
It looks horrible. FAMU. But if you look at that defense, they've got 4 and 5 stars all over the place.
They do.
They cannot develop at North Carolina. So I think, you look at North Carolina, I think Pitt is way overhyped this year.
Same.
NC State is a surefire loss, in my opinion.
Yep.
I would be shocked if they beat them. I would not expect them to beat Miami. But the other thing I'll say about Virginia Tech is one of the biggest pain points as a fan has been how they play at home the last few years. And they've got to get back to winning at home, or else you can't be taken seriously as a program. I mean, it has been pathetic, their performance at home over the last few seasons. So if Brent Pry can come in, I'm not saying he needs to win every game at home, but, BC that first game, that's a tough opponent to open up the career in Lane Stadium. Make a statement there. West Virginia coming into your backyard. It's going to be a big-time environment. Can't fall flat. So, I mean, there's going to be pressure immediately. But, again, you've got to give this coaching staff time. You've got to be able to look in the mirror and realize kind of where you're at as a program right now. But I'm excited to see it play out. So what I'll say, too, about the season, I'll wrap it up this way. So as most people know or have known me, I am a lifelong Orioles fan. I had the Orioles on my groom's kick with Virginia Tech. It was Virginia Tech one layer, Baltimore on the second layer. And there's just been about 5 years of absolute soul-sucking baseball that has come out of that organization that has literally made me, one, not like baseball, at least baseball in the Charm City.
Yeah.
And two, I pretty much didn't watch an Orioles game for about 2.5 years. And then all of a sudden you come into this season, the over-under on Baltimore is 62 games to win. And right now, I think they've got 68-69 wins. They lost today against Cleveland. But they're in the thick of it in late August to make the playoffs. And they play in the best division in baseball, in the AL East. So if the Orioles can do it, just about any team in sports can do it. Because the Orioles is an organization that's poorly run, at least from an ownership standpoint. You've got Mike Elias, who's a stud in the GM position. Mm-hmm. But they've got a $30 million payroll. They play in the best division in baseball. And they've got two teams in their division that have payrolls over $200 million. And they're ahead of one of those teams in the standings. So the Hokies, it hasn't been much better for them since Baltimore pulled the plug on the approach that they were taking. Orioles were last in the playoffs in 2016. Plug got pulled. 2017, burned it to the ground. About September of 2018 is when the fire started burning in Blacksburg. It hasn't been fun, but this has been probably one of the more fun baseball seasons I can remember, at least from an Orioles perspective, because this team, you just look at them and they're not supposed to win. They're just not. They've just got a bunch of dudes who have gone out there, they play hard every night, and they put it together on the field. And there's no reason Virginia Tech can't do that. I'm not saying they have a chance to get in the college football playoff this year, but if they make it to a bowl or they beat a couple of teams that, they probably shouldn't beat on paper, that's really all you can ask in this first year of the Brent Pry area. And the vibes that you get coming out of the offseason is that, it seems like the culture is definitely been set in the right direction. Now we just have to see that prove out on the field.
Yeah, really any scenario that works out with Virginia Tech in a bowl this season is a win for the first season in Brent Pry. I will be absolutely ecstatic. Throw the record out the window. I don't give a damn. If we're in a bowl game at the end of the season, this has been a successful season for Brent Pry. I would love to see it. I think that's a great point you bring up on the Orioles. Nobody saw that one coming, especially given the payroll. But they're winning, and that's why they go out there and play the games. And don't worry so much about the record this year. There's going to be a lot of entertaining things happening with this football program, from the install of a new culture, getting to see more of the character of Brent Pry, what kind of head coach he is, how this whole thing is being put together, all new offensive and defensive schemes, new players on both sides of the ball, underperforming players that are undoubtedly going to be the rising or falling. We don't have the same expectations that we've had on this podcast the last 3 to 4 years. But I would argue that where we are right now, and I know this may be different from you, I am more excited for this football season than I have been for the prior 3 football seasons. I am that much more excited about this team, not because I give a rip about what the final record is going to be, but just because I know that trajectory is going to be going in the right direction. And I am super excited to see some unknowns, because for the longest time, it felt like we knew the record and the way the season was going to play out before it even started. And for once, I got no real idea. I mean, I can say 6-6. I got no clue, man. This thing could go a lot of different directions, and, just embrace the uncertainty. It's going to be a good time.
No doubt. So let's, we kind of ran out of time on doing our ACC preview show. So we're going to bring you our top 3 ACC expectations this year. Tim, what's top of your mind for this list?
Expectations in regards to just anything in
conference
general?
Overall. Yeah, just things that you see playing out in the conference.
Okay, I think Pitt is going to be a lot worse, and I know you agree with me on this one. They're losing Kenny Pickett, the Blitnikoff Award winner. Anytime, it's rare that you see a team that isn't Clemson, Alabama, lose a quarterback, lose their offensive coordinator, and not just any old offensive coordinator, arguably the most productive in recent history at a school. You lose the Kenny Pickett, who played like a Heisman candidate last year, and you
was a
lose,
first-round pick in the NFL.
Right.
The only first-round quarterback drafted this year.
Right. And you lose the best wide receiver in college football. That is not a recipe for continued success on offense, and I'm not sure the defense has improved to a degree that would make up that offset. Yet, for some reason, I mean, I think I saw Desmond Howard had Pitt in his playoff bracket on College Game Day last week.
When I see things like that, I just immediately assume Desmond needs some attention. Like, look at me, look what I said. And I did look at it because it was absolutely ridiculous. I mean, you've got Keaton Slovis in at quarterback now. Like, he did nothing at Southern Cal.
No.
Like, nothing. There's no reason to be excited about Keaton Slovis if you're a Pitt fan, to be honest. And the fact that he's coming in with the new offensive coordinator, whose name is Frank Cignetti, by the way.
That's a great OC name.
He's got a track record of pretty subpar success at Pitt. So there's really not a lot to be excited about if you're a Pitt fan from an offensive perspective. Defensively, they might be okay, but they haven't been great the last couple of years. They've been a liability at certain points. And, maybe I'll eat my words. Maybe there's something at Pitt going on that I don't know at whatever the hell they call their field now that's not Heinz. That's reason enough that they're going to fail because it's a joke.
Oh,
it's
Heinz
Field. It always
generic insurance company field.com or something.
A Crucis something field. I don't even know how to say it.
Terrible.
But so I'm right there with you with Pitt. I do not think they're just like any other coastal team for the most part. They're
7-5, 8-4 team.
7-5 probably.
Yeah.
Probably going to get spanked by West Virginia. They're probably going to get spanked by Tennessee. Tennessee's going to get their hopes up, and then all of a sudden they're going to be 5-7 at the end of the season, and complaining about this was their year. They're the greatest 5-7 football team ever.
It's Tennessee's year every offseason, man.
Yeah, Tennessee and Texas A&M right there.
That's right.
My other thing too is I think Miami is best team in the Coastal, which I've mentioned. The other thing I'll say is I expect UNC to have their second straight losing season. Anyone who thinks, again, very similar to Pitt, that UNC is just going to pick up and be better without Sam Howell, they just haven't been paying attention. Sam Howell was the offense last year. I mean, 2 years ago they had Javonte Williams and Michael Carter. Last year it was Sam Howell. I mean, from a rushing standpoint and
remember where we were on this podcast a year ago in regards to UNC. You and I were saying the same exact thing about UNC. They were getting even more love than Pitt. And we came on here and said, you are not going to lose those two halfbacks along with De'Ami Brown and Daz Newsome on the outside and outperform the previous season's offensive numbers. And we expected them to take a nosedive. We did. Now, I will say, I can't remember the kid's name right now. He was playing Florida A&M, looked pretty good at quarterback. But Florida A&M, not only are they Florida A&M, but they almost couldn't play that game because of a lack of players on the roster. And somehow they made that defense look like Swiss cheese. Alarm bells should be going off in Carolina. But I agree with you on that take. Another losing record from UNC. That would not surprise me. The fact that Sam Howell's not there, that's a bigger deal than most seem to make it.
Yeah, and so I personally think Mac Brown will be retiring at the end of the season because there's just been too much talent to come into that program, and there's just been nothing but mediocrity coming out. Really, even worse than mediocrity. So
it's the Mac Brown way.
My other projection is, just the winner of the ACC this year, and I think that's going to be NC State. I think they're the best team, top to bottom. I don't think Clemson's back. I'm not a believer in DJ Uiagalelei, and I feel like maybe Clemson is drifting off into the sea. It just seems like things aren't going the way that they were at Clemson, and I think it's NC State's year. If there's a playoff team in the ACC, I think it's NC State.
I hope you're right. I think when you talk about the most complete team in the ACC, I think NC State is the most complete team. I mean, you talk about known quantity. There's a vacuum starting up behind me, a robot vacuum.
I thought maybe it was a fire alarm or something.
No, I didn't even know that thing was plugged in, and now it's vacuuming my floors. That's incredible. Yes, NC State is the most complete team. I think you have a quarterback who is easily the best in the ACC in my mind, in Devin Leary. You've got returners at virtually every position on the roster, and you have the best linebacking core in the nation, along with one of the deepest defenses in the conference. So that wouldn't surprise me. However, the top-end talent on Clemson is scary. While you would go NC State, I think I'm going to go Clemson. I think I do see a regression towards the mean for DJ Uiagalelei because last year was almost so incomprehensibly bad. Dabo is now Dabo. I never get that one right. Dabo. Dabo's put all his eggs in the DJ basket. The kid's got an absolute howitzer for an arm. If they can figure out how to harness him, I think he could take the Tigers back to the ACC title. And that's what I expect to happen. I hope I'm wrong, but that is one of my projections. I think Clemson is really going out on a limb there, going to win the ACC title game.
All right, well, that's our show for today. Can't wait for the season to officially kick off week 1. Be sure to listen, leave us 5 stars, and we're coming right back to you with a preview of the matchup against Old Dominion. See you guys later.
Appreciate it, guys.